One is, of course, the traditional firm litigation internship. The second, again, is a more traditional. You join a senior counsel, you assist him in his briefs for your internship period. The third, and what personally I think is the most important and also the less traveled path, is to do a litigation internship with a trial court lawyer or somebody perhaps, say, our age, who's in between the 30 to 40 bracket, who has substantial experience, who has enough work of their own, and who's doing a lot of drafting. Because I think the basis for most litigation careers is drafting and trial work. So I think to start, to pique your interest, you first need to start out with internships in litigations. Now, of course, it helps if you know the basic procedural laws, that is the CPC, CRPC, and the Evidence Act, but they do not need to be on your fingertips. That is to answer your question, because as you move along in your career, you will keep learning, you will keep picking up. Once all of this, these are things that you need not remember my memory. You should have a basic understanding of what the law is, of what the procedure is, but you don't need to have all of this by rote or at your fingertips.
That's
Okay,
true.
because
Any lawyer you join, he would just expect that you know the basics of three of these acts or a civil law. Whatever he says you to get a section or get a case law on particular section, the basic knowledge you should know. He also doesn't expect you that you know all these acts by heart. It's always an advantage that you know stuff, and it's helpful, and you look more smarter if you know all this. But anyways, people won't expect that you know everything by heart.
okay, just to add to whatever Rupan has just told you, you will be learning a lot more on the job than you will actually learn in the law school, because what you learn in theory is very different from what actually goes into court and what applies to a case. So when somebody actually comes to you with a case, they are not going to ask you about your knowledge of criminal law or procedure, or what section of the CPC you know. What they're going to come to you is with facts, and what they then want you to do is to prepare a brief that needs to, or a file, a suit, a complaint, a petition that needs to be presented, that needs to be filed in court. This, according to me, is extremely critical, because the entire foundation for a case is laid in what you draft. So I think it is very important to understand how to draft a particular suit, how to draft petitions and documents across various fora, because formats and pleadings for, say, something that goes to the CLB or the NCLT is very different from what goes to the trial court and what goes to the high court. So I think it's important, when you decide to start out on a litigation career, that you start with somebody who's young, who has enough drafting work, and who has enough varied work across, say, 2 or 3 forums for you to get uh, an understanding of the laws which you're going to be dealing with, and also what needs to go into a particular petition before a particular forum. I have a question from someone: how to overcome the fear that I'm a first generation lawyer and I don't have a client base. Okay, so I am also a first generation lawyer. I can answer that question quite simply. I'm a first generation lawyer. I don't have anybody from the legal background. I was fortunate to have worked with Mr. Arun Katpalia, and I'm still associated with his chambers. I do a couple of cases with him on and off. So he was fortunate, and I was extremely fortunate enough to be mentored by him. He gave me a lot of space to learn. He tutored me. He still mentors me with a lot of my cases, and he's helped me and continues to help me build a client base. So it's extremely important that you pick somebody who lets you grow in the profession. And there are a lot of lawyers who expect you to stick around their offices, not do your independent work. And there are very few lawyers who allow you to branch off, do independent work, while at the same time doing work from their office. So I think it's extremely critical that you find somebody of that nature.
To
Uh,
add on to Angad's thing, I would say that yes, obviously you need to work with someone who also gives you a bit of free hand on his clients as well. Like if the lawyer trusts you, then he would give a free hand, like go ahead, do the work for this lawyer, client and handle yourself. There are a lot of people who say that this is your baby, this case you are going to handle whenever you need me, I'll chip in, but otherwise you need to handle on all dates in court, do all your drafting, wherever you stuck, let me know, I'll help you. But also to answer this question that how to get clients. So you, it's a thumb rule that you have to start with someone. It's very rare that people just start on their own from day one. So once you start with someone, give it 2 3 years of time of, and then you start developing your reputation in that particular chamber. People start knowing you in court. Then people start referring you that on this particular subject he or she is good, you should go contact him. People give you cases. So slowly like this, from the reference perspective, you start getting clients. So you don't need to worry. If you're good at your work, somewhere or the other, your name spreads and you will start getting clients.
right, and I also think it's very important because if you display a certain capability to your senior, if you inspire confidence in your senior, then of course your senior is more willing to part with a section of his clients to you, right? So if you're competent and if you're diligent, I don't think you need to worry about being a first generation lawyer. That that being said, it's certainly very difficult to start out as a first generation lawyer. It's going to take you at least 7 to 8 years to establish yourself, but it's not impossible, and it's not something that you really need to fear. Okay. Um, so right. So I'm going to move on to the second part. I also have another question from someone who's saying, why is it so important or recommended that you intern with a young lawyer? Right. So this is my personal view that it's important and highly recommended that you intern with a young lawyer. Like I had mentioned earlier, one of the most important reasons is one that you get to see a lot of trial work that happens, and you get to see a lot of drafting. The more senior up you move, the kind of briefs and the kind of work that you are going to be handling may no doubt be extremely high stake, may include very complicated questions of law, um, but it still does not teach you the basics of how the suit or the petition gets to where it is. That can only be learned with somebody who has done the basic drafting, who's met with the client, who's in possession of all the facts, and who understands and knows all the evidence that has come. That's why I think it's important that you start with somebody right at the bottom. At the
See,
higher level, you're only going to be discussing very, very complicated questions of fact, and you're not going to be doing any sort of trial work.
to add some detail to that question, which says why is it so important, recommended that you intern with a young lawyer. So interning with a firm, a senior advocate, or an established advocate who's not a senior, or a young advocate, that totally gives as your perspective that what you have to learn in a particular office. Like every office will teach you something new and different. Every office has its own working culture, own working style. So a young lawyer might give you a small work kind of work, that prepare a list of dates or something, or he might depend on you. You are good, he'll give you a drafting work. A senior lawyer would most likely give you to prepare list of dates or do a research on a particular topic. I mean, a chamber of a senior advocate, usually juniors there refer work to interns. So during your internship, you can just see that what kind of office to join, whether a firm culture to join, a young lawyer, a senior advocate. It'll just give you an idea. But once you enter or step into profession, that's a totally different thing. So you won't get the same kind of work which you used to get as an intern. People will be more dependent on you because now you're a practicing advocate and you're no more an intern.
We have another question that is, as a first time intern, what sort of work can you expect from interning under a lawyer? Now, quite honestly, the kind of work that will be given out to an intern will depends a lot on what the intern also brings to the office. A more motivated, a more focused, a more proactive intern we are obviously more amenable to giving them a lot more work. So we are happy, at least young lawyers are very happy to give them drafting. We're very happy to include you in client meetings. We're happy to give you research work. Of course, you can't have appearances in court, uh, but with a young lawyer, your exposure to litigation is much, much more than you would get in a senior counsel's office, or
But
perhaps even
as a
even a
junior,
litigation firm's office.
but not as an intern.
Rupin, I think the next question is for you to answer. What value does an
I
LLM add in
have
litigation?
one more question before that. That should I? Harsh has asked the question: should I intern in same law firm again and again, or should I do it in different law firms? So Harsh, to
Oh,
answer your question is that once you like a firm and you like to work there, you like your subject interest, then it's good that you work there again and again, so that one day when you in your fifth year or so, they might give you a pre-placement offer, or they might ask you to come back after you graduate, work there for 3-4 months, and then they'll offer you a job. But if you don't like it, then obviously you have to experiment with different law firms and law offices to boil down to one that which you need to start your career with.
can I also just add to that, Harsh? I think it's important for you to also sort of increase your internship portfolio before you narrow down on deciding to intern at one firm again and again and again. So perhaps you should explore the opportunity of interning at say three firms. You can do an Amarchand, you can do a JSA, you can do a Khaitan, and you can do a Dua and Associates. Whatever you like the best, you then reapply to.
Yes. And there's a question that by Abhishek Kumar. I hope you're doing. Can you please discuss where a first generation lawyer should start or his or her practice? So before Angad takes this question, I would just add up that when you're in law school, if you have to and you want to go into litigation, so firstly you need to choose a place or a city or a state where you need to start with your litigation practice, because India is very vast and every court has a different procedure for filing your filing procedures, your pleading styles, everything is different. Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras are charter courts. They have their own CPC amendments. Delhi original side has different rules. If you go to other states which don't have original side at the high court, their district level drafting, filing, everything is different. So first you need to choose that which city you want to settle down in, and then you need to start accordingly that how good a starting lawyer can, or what's the starting point in that city for a starting lawyer is. So Angad can continue on this question now.
Uh, sorry, sorry. What was the question?
The question is that the first generation lawyer should start with his or her practice where?
Where? Okay. So that is actually a difficult question to answer, but it's a good question. Uh, like I told you, the gestation period for a first generation lawyer is really quite long. So you have to be open to the thought that you're going to perhaps need some external funding from your parents for a 5 or 6 year period till you actually establish yourself. Now, having said that, there is an upward trend in the kind of salaries that are being paid to junior lawyers. Obviously, your exposure to the kind of litigation that you're going to witness is much greater in tier one cities, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay. Tier two cities neither have the quality nor the volume of work that these big cities have. So if you do have the means, I would suggest that you always start in a tier one city. Pick up. You'll have to choose what sort of city you want to work in, what you're comfortable with, because Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and Delhi all have very different styles of working. So you need to see what sort of environment you're comfortable with and pick a city accordingly.
Okay, so now to take up Ajit's question that what value does LLM add in litigation and at what point it is advisable if it is. So Ajit, LLM per se in general is not that preferred in litigation because the sooner you start litigation, it's better. But it will help you if you do a master's after like joining a firm for 3-4 years. Then you get into a very good law school, which is going to add up to your profile, do an LLM, and then join a profession. And after you join a profession, after your LLM, then you have to pick up the cases which are related to your specialization. In general, the LLM won't help you, but if you specialize in arbitration, then you pick up arbitrations. You do your masters in international arbitration, then yes, people will have confidence you that you can handle international arbitrations. Or if you do your LLM in IPR, then people would say yes, he's a master's in IPR, so he can handle IPR issues. So that's why you have to decide from law school that if you want to do masters, either do it immediately after law school and start your career at one go after a year or two passing out. Otherwise, you have to wait for a bit, make your name into a field, do masters in that field, and then start your litigation push from there.
We have another question from Yash that is on the issue of learning legal drafting and whether there is any online course for it. Now, quite honestly, I'm not aware of any online course for legal drafting. But the best way for you to learn legal drafting is to work at a young lawyer's office or at a trial court lawyer's office. The drafts vary across jurisdictions. Again, each state has its own format for drafting, what goes into a draft, how the court likes its draft. So these are issues you can only pick up once you're interning or working with a lawyer. And linked to this, there's another question that is, do moot courts have some kind of helping in going into litigation with respect to drafting? To some extent, they may, but not largely, because the kind of drafting that you do for moots is very different from the kind of draft that the petitions and plaints that are filed in court. So, I mean,
Moots
it may give you some.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Rupin.
Go ahead.
So, while it can certainly give you some grasp of the language and structure, it doesn't entirely direct you to how drafts have to be filed in court.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, that it gives you a fair idea and confidence, but it's totally different what is there in moots and what is taught in law school compared to the actual practicalities.
Okay, so is it important to intern with the same senior lawyer throughout law school? So, quite honestly, I don't think it is very important for you to intern with the same senior counsel throughout law school, for the simple reason that I think you need to diversify yourself. You need to learn more from other advocates, because interning with the same senior counsel, he has only one particular style of functioning. He's most likely going to be restricted to a certain kind of cases. I think it's important that you learn more from a lot of other senior counsels who are out there if you wish to intern with the senior
counsel. We have a question by Lisa. The questions are too much, so I'll do it one by one. So the last one is from Lisa. It's, will working under any PSU be considered as a part of litigation or service? Lisa, working with any PSU is equivalent to an in-house counsel of any company. So it'll give you a fair idea how pleadings are drafted, because your lawyers will draft pleadings. You will check, fact check or law check. But since you don't draft yourself or appear in court yourself, the exposure of litigation is not the same. But yes, you know the law, what your lawyers are doing. You also guide them as a PSU counsel. You read upon and then guide your lawyers that we can do this, we can do that. What factors should I consider while choosing a city or a state to settle in? While my home is in Kolkata, I've interned in Mumbai extensively and like the work culture there. So Joyji, it's good that you've worked in Mumbai a lot and then you like the place. Now what you have to see is that the work you want to do into the field, how is the work there in Mumbai? Like, there are good firms relating to that particular field of law, or good lawyers, or courts have such specific sections to deal with, like IPR original side work in Bombay High Court is good to settle down there. Big firms, corporate firms are there in Bombay to settle into. So it's just, once you settle down to the city, then you have to see your field of interest to go ahead and work in a particular city.
We have a couple of questions on how to build a CV for a litigation career. Now, quite honestly, for litigation careers, CVs are not very important. From what I have seen in the applications that I have received, we just take a look at the application. We're not much concerned with what kind of moves you've done, what kind of debates you've done. If we like the way a particular CV has been presented to us, irrespective of what kind of work the person has done, and if we like the background, uh, we're generally more open to taking on people. So we're not going to favor someone who's probably done a Stetson over somebody who's not done a Stetson. Move.
There's a question by Harsh that if you start your career in a city where the drafting is it in Hindi, especially in district courts, how to go about it? Harsh, the Hindi drafting can be taught by either once you start practicing in that court and your seniors will guide you through that. Honestly, I've never done that and I know Angad has not done that. So if we start appearing or drafting it in Hindi, we would like guidance from our seniors who's already practicing there and they would let us know what are the nitty gritties of Hindi drafting and all.
Um, we have another question on income. Is it necessary that gestation period for a first generation lawyer is 5 to 6 years? And if so, what sort of income can be expected? Because this becomes an important issue, right? So I had just dealt with this briefly, but the younger lawyers are more generous with the kinds of salaries that they are willing to pay. Having said that, they are not uh, over the top, but they're not meager either. If you join a senior counsel's office, a senior counsel obviously pays you much, much more than a young lawyer would pay you. But then, of course, that's a trade-off that you have to be willing to take. Because, like I had explained earlier, the kind of work that you're going to be doing in a senior advocate's office is basically preparing a list of dates, preparing briefs for the next day, and you're not going to be arguing in court, right? So that is a sort of trade-off that you have to be willing to see how comfortable you are
Yeah,
with.
but the
Having said
only
that, there are a lot of, sorry, Rupin, let me just finish
sure,
this.
sure, go ahead.
Having said that, there are a lot of people who start off with the senior counsel and then, or with a litigation firm, and then move down the line, either branch off to their own work or start doing trial work. Like so the idea is that they build a corpus that they have to fall back on, and which gets them through the next 2-3 years of branching off or being independent. Okay. Yeah, Rupin, you
So
wanted to
there's a
complete?
question by Arpit which says, from which year of the law school should I start litigation internships? Arpit, frankly, I started my litigation internships from second year, by third semester end, because then you have basics of, I believe, IPC, family law. So you can start with any lawyer who practices either criminal side or the matrimonial side, so that you get a flavor of internship from flavor of litigation, and as well as you don't feel lost that you don't know that subject. Family law 1 and IPC 1 are being taught in third semester, I believe, still. Also, to start, add up here is that if you want to start, like I believe within your first and second year of profession, you won't realize that which field to go in. But nowadays, there's so much competition that you have to go into one single branch of law or maybe two. One cannot do and attend cases all over Delhi or maybe all over Bombay in different courts. If you go into corporate law or attending matters with NCLT and NCLAT, then you will hardly get, if you are expert in that subject, then you will hardly get time to go and attend matters in any other court. So it's better you find a good subject to work on during your college days, so that it's easier for you to work in that field with a particular senior and excel after 3-4 years of your initial tough time working with a senior before you go to go and decide to go independent.
There's another important aspect that we wanted to also discuss. That is judicial clerkships and judicial internships, which both Rupin and I feel are quite important in this process, because it definitely helps for one to get a view from the other side. And not only is from what we are told, is the experience very enriching, but it also has great CV value for anybody who's looking to do a master's, right? The other thing that you do get from judicial clerkships and judicial internships are, you obviously sitting in court, you have access to, and you see everybody who comes before that judge to argue. So it gives you a sense of which counsel is good, which counsel knows his law, um, and you know where you should then make your applications for either jobs or future internships.
Yeah, if you want to see your future internships, like you do your judicial internship in your second or third year, then it'll give you a very specific part to go on that. Yes, for litigation, I should join this lawyer. He argues really well. His knowledge of law is good. I can learn litigation skills from that particular lawyer. It will help you a lot. And doing your judicial internship as well as your judicial clerkship is, I feel, and strongly recommend for people who want to go for their masters. Like interning or doing JC with a Supreme Court judge is highly valuable, especially in United States. If you have worked with done a judicial clerkship with a Supreme Court judge, then definitely you get a very high chances of getting through a particular law school you want. And after that, to start with, nowadays Supreme Court is paying quite good amount to people who are doing judicial clerkships. I believe it is around 50 to 60,000 rupees a month, which is a very good amount to work with a judge, and the exposure you will get out when you're working with a particular judge. And some judges also give you liberty to even write judgments, which is amazing. You would get to know the other side of the profession, how that side works, which makes it easier for you to work from the side you want in future. And these days, there's another thing which is good and work quite well liked by people is that now students who are passing out from law schools are also getting absorbed by retired Supreme Court and High Court judges as their juniors or their clerks, whatever you say, for arbitrations. Like if you tend or have an interest in arbitrations, then you can have an option to join some retired Supreme Court judge and a High Court judge who will be dealing with high profile arbitration matters. You will get a good exposure there, and they also pay really well, which is a win-win situation for a person who's going to start. And that retired judge is going to guide you what happens at the bar side and what happens at the bench side. So you'll get insights from him, insights of both the sides from him.
Rupin, I think we have a couple of questions on how to get judicial clerkship and an internship under Supreme Court judges.
So I guess Yash has asked the question. Yes, you can get judicial clerkship through, I believe, there is a circular circulated by Supreme Court, which through registrar of your university, you apply for judicial clerkship as well as, no, one second, I'm sorry. Judicial internships are being held by registrar of a particular university, and for clerkship first you give a written exam nowadays, especially for the Supreme Court, and then there is an interview session by Supreme Court judges. Once you clear both the tests, then you are allotted a Supreme Court judge where you can do a judicial internship with.
In connection with this, we have another one. Is it advisable to intern under a High Court or a Supreme Court judge? Obviously, if you can get a Supreme Court judge, that is definitely more beneficial, at least CV value wise.
But I guess
And
a
of
High
course,
Court judge is also a good option to work with and has a equally good value for your CV.
so what I would say is you need to pick which High Court if you want to do a High Court JC, then you need to pick which High Court you want to do the JC in. For example, the Delhi High Court is extremely good. The Bombay High Court is extremely good. Uh, so these are, on that they are at par with the Supreme Court, the quality of judges that we have. So it would definitely be worth uh, doing a JC under some judges of the Delhi High Court.
So there's a question that at which stage of a career are we supposed to go for JC? If you want to go for JC, then it's best that you apply for JC as soon as you graduate from law school, or you apply in your final year of law school so that by the time you graduate, they absorb you. Because JC positions are very limited. Not every year they take a lot of JCs. I believe Delhi High Court has 3 JCs per judge, and Supreme Court has 2 JCs per judge. So the competition is tough, and not every time number of slots are open. Maybe 3-4 slots open up at a time. So you have to try also. The sooner the better.
I have a specific question addressed to me from Simran. That is, what does a career graph look like? So Simran, like I had told you, the gentleman that I was working with, Mr. Arun Katpalia, became a senior, was designated a senior while I was still working with him. But just to specifically answer your question, it would take you anywhere between 7 to 8 years to actually establish yourself um, as a recognized litigation counsel. For you to be go independent, though if you feel like you've still not got enough experience with a young counsel and you want to work with a senior counsel, then I'd suggest you perhaps do about 5-6 years with a young counsel, and you do perhaps 2 years with the senior counsel, and then you branch off on your own.
But career graph totally depends on how you perform. Like there are people who have been doing junior shifts from past 10-12 years, and there are people that who's just done for a year and then branch out to their own independent practice. So it totally depends that whenever you get confidence to go independent.
And of course, I understand. We both understand that it's difficult for a first generation lawyer to be able to do this. But like I said, it's not impossible. It is difficult, but with time you will find your legs in the profession.
No, and if you get a good senior, he'll give you a good case. If he has confidence in you and that you will serve his client the best, then he'll give you his cases and say that you do drafting and all. And if you need me, I'll appear in those matters as a senior. So you get a lot of work from your seniors once you branch out and go independent.
There was one more aspect that I think we've not dealt with enough, and I think a lot of you would possibly have questions in relation to. That is doing litigation internship or a litigation career at a firm. Now, both of us have
I guess we lost Angad due to some connection. Ashwini Umrikar has a question. Did we lose Angad?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
back. Chalo, I'm listening.
Okay. Angad, continue. I guess we lost him again. I'll start till the time he comes. Richa has a question: how to deal with fear of pleading in courts. So, Richa, to deal with the pleadings in courts is that you have to work with someone who has a good drafting skills, learn from him, and then slowly and steadily, once you draft, you will improve on your pleadings, and slowly your fear will go off. Once your pleadings have been accepted by court, you will get a confidence to work more on it, and one day your fear will be useful. So I have a question by Lisa which says, what work is expected in JC at High Court initially? So doing JCs in High Court or a Supreme Court is the same. Judges will ask you to prepare notes on the next day files, which are the cases which are listed. Either they'll go through your notes and then deal with the cases, or sometimes judges ask you to prepare notes so that you know the file inside out and they also read the file. So once they read the file and attend the court hearing, then you will see a different perspective how a judge looks at the matter and how you are looking at the matter, the same matter. So which will give you a good exposure on knowing that yes, this could be a possible interpretation for this section or this part of law. And also, once judge knows that you're good at your work, judge might give you to draft judgments, and then he can finalize them and pronounce it, which will ease his work, and you can, and he'll give you more and more such kind of work. Angad, you were saying something before we lost connection. Okay, I have a question that what is the benefit of doing a JC? So as I've already said that especially if you are doing you plan to do your masters, JC is highly beneficial. You should just go for it. It'll add a lot of value to your CV. And if you don't want to do your masters, still it'll give you one internship as a judicial like clerk or a judicial intern, or a 1 or 2 year JC would help you a lot in knowing that what happens the other side of the profession, how things work there, because it's totally different. How the file moves, how judges look into it. There's a discussion amongst judges that what particular case has to be and how it should be dealt. You, judges share views with each other on a particular case, which is very helpful. 2, 3 judges are guiding you. You know, general public have no access to them, but if you are a JC, you have access to judges. You can share knowledge with them. That's also very useful. Angad, there's a question: advisable to start your litigation career with a big firm, or one should join some good chamber?
Right. So that it's actually a difficult question to answer because it depends on a lot of factors. I understand that a lot of people have doubts with regard to financial stability, and they're really hesitant to go into litigation before that. So if that is the situation, then a firm would definitely help. Like I had also indicated earlier, uh, it is not a bad option to do put in 4 or 5 years with a firm, see firm litigation, because that gives you a good exposure to sort of corporate litigation. Um, Form a corpus of your own, and once you're done forming corpus, perhaps then look for a counsel and move work with the counsel for a couple of years and then start an independent practice. However, for people who perhaps have some sort of cushion, if they want to suppose litigate in their hometown, then I would suggest that you just get right into litigation. Don't go to a firm. Just start with litigation directly.
But there is one, to add to Angad's thing, there is one good option that you approach or you try to get into a firm which has a good litigation department. So that way, a first time lawyer can have a good pay package and a very good exposure on the litigation front. But what happens there is that mostly firms are dealing with big clients, and big clients want the senior to appear. So you start with as a briefing counsel, and in between you get an exposure to appear in court where your client would say that I don't want to spend that much money, you handle this hearing or that hearing or small hearings, which will slowly give you exposure to litigation. But agreed, a big firm litigation department will give you good amount of money and a good amount of work X on high profile matters.
I also have a very interesting question from Manirudh. That is, should one start with big city litigation and then move back to hometown? Now that's actually quite an interesting question. because the competition in big cities is is a lot, and I still think there is a huge space and a great need for second tier cities to develop their legal practice. So I think it's not a bad option at all if you're able to spend 6-7 years, pick up some sort of a practice from here, pick up court craft, pick up the law from here, and then move back to a tier two city if you have a base there and practice there.
A lot of people in past, the alumni from NALSAR have done the same. They started their career with Mumbai or Delhi and they shifted to their hometowns, such as maybe Bhopal or Lucknow or Allahabad. A lot of people are practicing in Allahabad as well.
We have another question from Nikita Bansal, that is second year who has interned under criminal lawyers and I'm interested in that kind of work. I've been told that it's not desirable for women to start litigation in that line, especially if you're a first generation lawyer. Nikita, to answer your question, there is no disadvantage in a woman doing criminal law. In fact, I think more and more women are getting into criminal law, and I think that's it's a great change that we're able to see in our generation. So if that's where your inclination lies, I think you must absolutely go for it.
Yeah, and you never know if there are a lot of female criminal lawyers who are good at their work and they have very good matters. You start your internships or join them as a lawyer, you'll get a very good exposure and you that it'll prove you wrong that it's difficult for women to join criminal practice.
Right. So do we have any more questions?
Yeah, there's a question. What are the requirements for JC exam? Anita Kumar. So, as far as I know, like it's been like 4-5 years back, I looked at it. The requirement is that you have to just pass law degree, college degree, and apply. And you have to. It's not necessary that whether you're enrolled with your state bar council, because till the time you are a JC, you cannot practice law in any court. That undertaking you need to give. So if you want to do JC, just keep it in mind that you cannot go into the litigation side for and appear before any kind of tribunal, court, or any forum. Working as a JC is working on the other side, and Supreme Court clearly says or High Court says that you cannot appear. So you just need a law degree to apply. That's it.
We have another question that is starting in Delhi a disadvantage, because if I want to make a jump to the Supreme Court later, I'd have a better referral base if I start in some other state. So to answer your question, unless you already have some legal background in the state, in your home state, it would be better for you to start off a litigation practice in Delhi, especially if you wish to move to the Supreme Court. And my reason for this is simple. That is, if you're in Delhi, you have more access to the Supreme Court. The general trend is people who leave their home states and move to the Supreme Court already have a flourishing practice. And when they move to the Supreme Court, then they are generally briefed for the Supreme Court by counsels who are there in their state. But if you do not have a base, you're going to first have to set up your base in that hometown, which is going to take you 10-15 years. Then you're going to have to move to the Supreme Court. Whereas if you're in Delhi, you already have the option of practicing directly at the Supreme Court or at the High Court and the Supreme Court. So to answer your question, being in Delhi is definitely not a disadvantage.
So there's a question now that is it necessary to publish papers in reputed journals for pursuing LLM from abroad, and how many publications would be advisable? It is definitely an advantage to get your papers published in any reputed journals worldwide. But the number totally depends on you, that how much hard you can work. 1 or 2 are also good to get into any good law school, but that should be published in a very good reputed international journal. And same person has asked a question that big firm litigation team will teach you how to brief seniors but not to argue in court your views. Yes, till the time you are a first or a second year associate in that firm, you might not even get to argue in any court for a small hearing as well. But as you grow in that particular firm, after 4 5 years, you will be handling and arguing your own cases as you get your own clients to that firm. Initially, from day one, you will get a good exposure to brief seniors. You would learn from those seniors who you are briefing how to look at law, how to argue, everything. You'll get a good exposure from that end.
We have a question from Ashwin and one from Rahil, and I'm going to answer both of those questions together. Um, Rahil, first to answer your question, um, like I had indicated earlier, I think it's extremely important that when you're litigating, you learn trial work. Now, there are certain high courts in India which have original jurisdiction and do trial work. For instance, the Bombay High Court does trial work, Delhi High Court does trial work, Calcutta and Madras, the presidency towns, they all do trial work. So you could start under a lawyer who's practicing it at the one of these high courts, and of course, then you would have access to trial work. If your other option is if you want to start directly at the Supreme Court, then the kind of matters that you're going to be getting are going to be very different because, like I had indicated, you're not going to be dealing with facts, you're not going to be dealing with trial, you're just going to be dealing with the substance of the law. So if that is the kind of practice that you want, then it definitely helps for you to just start off directly at the Supreme Court rather than go through the trial court, high court, and then the Supreme Court. Ashwin, to answer your question, yes, it can get very frustrating to be in litigation, but you must understand that litigation is 70% a patience game. You have to be extremely patient. There will be times when you will be extremely frustrated that that your case is stuck or that it's moving too fast for your liking. But these are all part and parcel of the game. And like I had said, your gestation period is going to be 7 to 8 years. So you have to have that patience.
To add with, there will be times that months you don't have any work. You are eating out of your own pocket. That gets very frustrating. But if you have patience and if you have deep pockets, not that deep, but you can sail through it, that will be the best thing because after 7 8 years, if you establish yourself, there is no looking back. So I have a question from Tilak which says, can joining lower judiciary be a good option first and then join litigation as an end goal? So Tilak, I'm believing that you want to join lower judiciary as a judge. So if you join it as a judge, then I don't think that you will be wanting to quit your job as a judge and start with litigation. So it's better you continue that, grow there, and one day you never know, you might be a high court judge. So there's a question, what average salary can I expect as a young lawyer? So there is no, Ruchir, there is no fixed amount established in the field of law that all lawyers would give you minimum 30,000, 40,000. It all depends from lawyer to lawyer. There are lawyers who will pay you just 5,000, trial court people. There are good lawyers who will pay you 40, 50,000. There are good senior lawyers who will pay you 1.5. So it all depends person to person, lawyer to lawyer. But yes, average would be with a decent lawyer in Delhi would be 30, 35. And it'll be a bonus if your lawyer allows you to work on your own matters so that you can make some more money.
I have another question from Ajit. That is, what is the scope of growth financially and work-wise while being under the same lawyer during the 7-8 gestation period? Ajit, to answer this question, I think it's very critical that you choose the right type of lawyer under whom you want to work and for this entire gestation period, because a lot of your career depends on the kind of lawyer that you do choose to work with. So most 95% of lawyers do not allow you to do your independent work. So you're sort of struggling to balance between doing your work and doing your senior's work. But there are few and far between lawyers who allow you to do their work as well as pursue your own independent practice. Obviously, salaries go up the longer that you stay with the same lawyer. So there is scope for growth, both work-wise as well as financially, if you stick around with the same lawyer, provided that he's a good lawyer.
Some lawyers these days are following the rule that they'll give you a cut out of a case. Like if you are helping them out, they'll give you a lump sum or a per hearing. So it totally depends that how useful are you to that lawyer on that particular case. Good lawyers pay. So don't think that going into litigation or starting into litigation is that there's no money and anything. But if you land up with a good senior, people pay. Everyone understands that it's very hard to start off in litigation. So people pay decent amount to where a starter can have comfortable life.
So we have an interesting question from Shavani, which is what is the difference between in starting out as under an AOR and under a senior advocate? So Shravani, the basic difference that you need to understand is that a senior advocate does no drafting. And AOR, as you would know, does drafting and filing at the Supreme Court, right? So if you're going to work under an AOR, you're going to be drafting a lot of special lead petitions. You're going to be briefing, and perhaps if you're lucky, you'll be getting to argue. Whereas if you're going to be working with a senior advocate, you're just going to be preparing briefs that have already come in. You're going to be doing a basic amount of research, and you're definitely not going to get to argue any of those matters in court.
No, but to add on this, if you have an aim to practice only in Supreme Court, then you should start your career with an AOR, because to become a AOR yourself, you need to have a practice certificate from an AOR for 4 years, I believe, Angad?
4 years, or I think so. 4 years.
4 to 5 years of
4 or 5
practice
years.
certificate from an AOR. So it's better you start from day one, and after 5 years, when you want to apply for an AOR exam, or after 7 years, then you have a certificate in your hand. And it's not that AORs always brief seniors. There are a lot of AORs who argue themselves as well. So once your senior AOR is not available, then you can fill in the gap and argue before a registrar court, or maybe for a small hearing before a Supreme Court judge.
And judges these days are also more amenable to letting juniors argue. So it's definitely worth working with an AOR.
Yeah, and there is also a possibility that a particular AOR would not only work in Supreme Court. They also take matters which are there in Delhi High Court or any particular tribunal. So working with an AOR will give you exposure from top to bottom, if that AOR has the other work besides Supreme Court.
We have another question from Rugved, which is, could you suggest any firms for internship to learn code drafting? Right. So to answer this question, I'm not sure how many firms will actually give interns drafting work. I think the individual lawyers are more amenable to giving interns drafting work. But some of the firms that have good litigation departments are, of course, Amarchand has a good corporate litigation department. GSA has a decent litigation department. Khaitan has a good litigation department. Duan Associates has a good litigation department.
Even CAM has a good litigation department.
CAM as well as CAM. Yeah, so these are all places where you'll at least you'll have some sort of exposure to drafting, though they may not give you anything to draft.
Any more questions? Aman has asked a question that, are judicial internships beneficial for a foreign master's? Like I already said, yes, your judicial internships and clerkships are very beneficial for your master's program, because they make a very good value to your CV compared to someone who's not done it.
Right. Do we have any more questions?
Oh, it's already been an hour, so we'll be happy to attend questions on our email. If you have any questions or you need any kind of help from us, we'll be happy to reply on email as well. So Angad, we can put our email IDs on this group chat, and then if anyone has a question.
Right. So Rupin and I are both accessible on our phones as well as on our email. So if you have any doubts, please feel absolutely free to get in touch with us. and we thank all of you for
Attending our
this session.
session.
And yeah, we hope that we've been of some assistance to you.
Thank you, guys.